All right, today we're doing a deep dive into the investment case for a company that is absolutely fundamentally critical to the entire global tech world, yet I'm willing to bet most of you have never even heard its name.
Just think about that for a second. From an investor's point of view, what if a single company made something so essential that our entire digital world, from the most powerful AI data centers all the way down to the phone in your pocket, literally couldn't exist without it?
Well, that company is real. It's not a flashy name like NVIDIA or Apple. Nope, it's a giant, hiding in plain sight. And that company is Tokyo Electron, or TEL for short.
So, what in the world does this invisible giant actually do, and why should any of us care? To get that, we need to peek behind the curtain and see how a computer chip is actually born. Tokyo Electron makes something called wafer fabrication equipment. Now that sounds super technical, but here's all you need to know. These are the impossibly complex, ultra-precise machines that physically build computer chips, one atomic layer at a time. And TEL doesn't just make any old machines. They are the top supplier for the most difficult, most valuable part of the entire manufacturing process. Now, for any investor, this is the part that should really get your attention. We need to talk about what protects a company from its competition, what we call moats. And believe me, TEL's moats are some of the deepest and widest you'll ever come across. And this, right here, is the absolute core of TEL's power. It's best to think of it like a lock and a key. You've probably heard of the Dutch company ASML. They make the lock, the only machine in the world called an EUV machine that can print the tiniest, most advanced circuits. But here's the catch. That machine is useless without the key. You need a special tool called a coder/developer to get the silicon wafer ready. And Tokyo Electron is the only company on planet Earth that makes that key.
Yeah, you're seeing that right, 100%. That is Tokyo Electron's market share for the key that unlocks ASML's machine. It's not an oligopoly, it's a straight-up monopoly. A pure monopoly in a step that is absolutely mandatory for making the world's best chips. So if you're TSMC, Samsung, or Intel, you have no choice. You have to buy from both of them.
But here's the thing. TL is no one-trick pony. On top of that airtight monopoly, they have the #1 or #2 spot in a whole bunch of other critical steps in making a chip, like etching and deposition. This means they are completely woven into the fabric of the entire manufacturing line.
And that deep integration creates another monster of a moat, sky-high switching costs. See, once a chipmaker like TSMC builds a production line around a specific TEL machine, they spend years and millions of dollars perfecting that recipe. If they tried to swap it out for a competitor's tool, they'd risk disaster, months of delays, terrible chip yields. It's just not worth it. They are, for all practical purposes, locked in.
Okay, so we have a company with these just incredible, durable moats. But what about growth? Is this a sleepy giant? Not a chance. TEL is sitting right at the crossroads of some of the biggest tech trends on the planet.
You've got 3 huge growth engines firing all at once. First, AI. All those AI chips need a special type of memory called HBM, which is made by stacking chips on top of each other. That stacking process is incredibly complex and requires a ton of TEL's core tools. Second, we're moving to a whole new type of transistor design called gate-all-around. It's way more complex to build and, you guessed it, requires more of TEL's advanced equipment. And third, you've got governments around the world, through things like the CHIPS Act, pumping billions into building new chip factories. That means a massive wave of new orders for TEL.
And the sheer size of this growth is just staggering. The total market for the stuff TEL sells is projected to roughly double, maybe even more, in less than a decade. We're not talking about a small cyclical bounce here. This is a massive, long-term expansion of the entire industry.
But of course, no investment is ever that easy. And for a company like Tokyo Electron, the risks are just as big as the rewards. As an investor, you have to stare 2 things right in the face: this industry's brutal cycles and the long shadow of global geopolitics.
So the semiconductor industry is famous for its wild boom and bust cycles, and TL is on the front lines. Just look at this roller coaster of sales growth. One year they're up over 43%. 2 years later they crash by 17%. And then boom, the very next year they're projected to rocket back up to a new record high. This kind of whiplash is just part of the deal.
And now for what is maybe the single biggest risk of all. Look at this. Over a third of Tokyo Electron's sales are to China. This puts them smack dab in the middle of the US-China tech war and all the export restrictions that come with it. If tensions escalate, a huge chunk of TEL's business could be at risk almost overnight.
It's a massive, unpredictable variable hanging over the company. On top of all that, TEL's fate rests in the hands of a tiny number of customers. In fact, in a recent year, just 3 companies, Intel, TSMC, and Samsung, made up nearly half of their total sales. So if just one of those companies decides to delay a new factory, it hits TEL's bottom line hard and fast.
So here we are. We have an incredible business with a real monopoly and massive growth trends, but it's also facing these huge cyclical and geopolitical risks. So how does an investor even begin to weigh all this and come to a final verdict?
Well, the first place you look is the company's financial strength, and TEL's balance sheet is, frankly, a fortress. We're talking consistently high profitability, it generates tons of cash, and, this is huge, it has 0 debt, completely debt-free. That financial muscle means it can easily survive the downturns and keep spending on R&D when weaker competitors have to pull back. Okay, what about the price you're paying? When you line TEL up next to its big American rivals, Applied Materials and Lam Research, something really interesting pops out. Their profitability is pretty much in the same ballpark, but look at the price-to-earnings ratio. TEL trades at a noticeable discount. That could suggest the market is a little too worried about those geopolitical risks.
So really, it all boils down to this simple trade-off. The bull case is crystal clear. You get a monopoly on a critical piece of technology, you're riding the AI wave for the next decade, and you're buying it at a reasonable price. The bear case is just as clear. You're exposed to huge geopolitical risk, those brutal industry cycles, and you're depending on just a few big customers.
And that brings us to the final, essential question you have to ask yourself. On one side of the scale, you have this undeniable technological fortress. On the other, you have the chaotic, unpredictable weight of global politics. So does the power of Tokyo Electron's monopoly truly outweigh the risk? That, right there, is the billion-dollar question.